Item number 3, discussion and possible action on acceptance of grant funds for the amount of $370,000 for splash pad and playground improvements at Mineral Wells Park. Staff comments, please.
So this is the 50/50 match grant that was applied for at the end of July. And we actually received a tentative award letter on Friday. And so this would be $437,500 of our money paired with money from OTRD to do a new splash pad utilizing the existing line of the wading pool at Mineral Wells. It would also include ADA accessible hard surface parking and sidewalks, all-inclusive playground equipment to replace our current equipment that's from the 90s. And then it would also include 5 historic-looking pavilions for families and picnicking.
So this will fit with more of the motif of Mineral Wells with historical kinds of structures, if you will, in the splash pads?
Absolutely. So the splash pad rendering that we have is a railroad theme to kind of give history and a tip of the hat to everything that has established Guthrie. And then the playground was a little Western saloon type playground. So there won't be primary colors, there won't be anything contemporary. We really want to keep the integrity of the park and keep that rich history going.
And again, it'll all be ADA accessible, just like what we did at Banner Park?
Yes, and right now we don't have any hard surfacing at Mineral Wells, so it's not ADA accessible. Even if you could get to the sidewalk, you would have to cross gravel anywhere you would park out there in order to do that. So we think that that will be a significant improvement.
Does acceptance of this require us to put in a splash pad at Mineral Wells?
That was part of the project proposal.
Is it required that we put in a splash pad? That's what I'm asking. Do you know?
I don't know the answer to that.
We would have to amend our application, and it would be the possibility that you would lose points, so you would lose the grant if you took a major piece out of your grant application. But we would know that without going forward with it. But normally, if you take a major item out of your project,
Right.
you lose enough points that you then lose the grant.
Or you have to put something back in that's major that would replace it?
If it would be something acceptable to the granting agency, yes.
Okay.
That, and I agree with Commissioner Case. I have issues with the splash pad at that location. I think it's great that it'd be updating the playground equipment and the historic pavilions or looking pavilions that go around. I think that keeps the park very nice and maybe even more accessible to a lot of different people. The ADA compliance and the hard surfacing, part of the charm of the old park is the old drives and the old walkways. I understand that's hard for infirm people to get around, and I guess that's just part of progress that we have to put up with. I do also have problems with it just being a 50/50 grant. That's $437,000. That's a lot of money that we got to come up with that a lot of ways I think might be better spent, say, at our sports complex. Yes, that would be even though that's a big money outlay, it still is a nice chunk of change to put into it.
What's the issue with the sports complex?
I'd like to, I have no problem with the sports.
I'm sorry, splash pad.
Splash pad one, I think it's it's not that historic in that area that keeps the park quieter. It's right next to a pool. I don't know how, or a big lake,
pond.
Pond that's
But you have
danger.
to fence that. You'd have to fence
Just a minute.
Yes, we'd have to fence. We'd have to keep people off because obviously people are going to take their kids to a splash pad. They're going to drop them off. They're going to leave. Who's going to leave? Who's going to play in a splash pad when you see a big pond over here that they're going to go? So I see a major liability for the city with a splash pad right next to an open access.
Okay. Has the liability issue been addressed, or is there a liability issue with the pond there?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I think it would just be if that was a step we wanted to take to put that in. We did have in the budget, we did have a decorative fence around the splash pad, and that's in this budget. I would say that Banner Park was done without grant money, and that was a $735,000 project. So very, very similar, but we're actually, taking this free money, if you will, and pairing it with our money to make the dollar go further to have a substantial improvement. The area that was proposed for the splash pad used to be a wading pool. So I feel like we're utilizing that existing water line, and that kids used to play there during the summer months anyways.
And I've never seen a history of people leaving the wading pool, go jump in the pond and drown, but
Well, one of the things I've looked at a bunch of splash pads, and I don't see them right next to a pond within 30 feet, 40 feet of a pond.
But in the reverse to that is, I grew up with that splash pad or
Right.
the
Wading
the little
pool.
wading pool, and there was never anyone
Well,
over there in the river or the pond or whatever you want to call it. And a lot of times the parents did drop them off. It just never
was that
an
pond
issue.
there as it is today?
Not exactly as it is today, but it was
Yeah.
there.
Well, and that's one of the concerns, because I've been to Banner Park with my granddaughter on a couple of different occasions, and those kids are everywhere, absolutely everywhere. But that's not the question that I have. That's their question right at this point. Question I have is, can this grant, is this type of grant the same type of grant we would use at the sports complex?
this is the
That's one
type of
question.
grant that could be used for any kind of outdoor
Okay.
recreation.
That's one question. And then could this type of grant be used for a neighborhood park across the street behind Ace to kind of revitalize an entire neighborhood?
I actually like that idea of taking that
Versus
money.
mineral
I don't
wells.
know,
Trying to
Leroy,
turn-
I don't know
Hold
what
on
we
just a
can.
second.
Just a minute.
Versus trying to turn mineral wells into a neighborhood park, basically, is what we're trying to do.
And it's not a neighborhood.
It's not a neighborhood.
No, it's a historic.
Okay, but we have a prime area across the street for a neighborhood park.
I don't believe,
Multiple areas
we
in there.
don't own land over there.
Okay, we buy the land. There's a lot of lots over there I'm sure we can get for,
Is that?
Less than
Pennies on the dollar.
$437,000.
Excuse me?
Seriously.
Typically-
There's whole blocks, half blocks.
Typically, Land and Water Conservation Fund grants are used for larger, more regional park improvements like the sports park, sports facilities, this type of thing,
Yes.
rather than infill or neighborhood parks. I'm not saying they can't be funded, but typically, we originally looked at the sports complex as our preferred application for this round of the Land and Water Conservation Grant. We were in the process of trying to buy land for the sports complex. We could not work out a deal with the School Land Commission, so we could not go forward at the time this application was due with an application for the sports complex. It would still be 50/50.
So you transferred it.
So what we did was we took what we thought was the second priority, another splash pad in our community, addressing the playground situation and the parking situation, and applied it to this. Our hope is that in the next year or two, we will be in a position to apply for another Land and Water Conservation Fund to get money for the sports facility. Now, the sports facility we're looking at, and now looking at the 80 acres, it's going to be between a 12 to $14 million project.
Right.
So we're going to have to do it in pieces.
You're right.
This grant won't keep us from getting the grant in the future for that project. And if we break it down and look at it in pieces, I think most of us would agree that the playground equipment, it's over 20 years old. It doesn't meet today's standards as far as ADA accessibility. Safety features have changed since that equipment was installed. You can't get replacement parts. We had a slide problem, and it took us 6 months, I think, to get a replacement slide. So that equipment needs to be replaced. If you look at the parking situation, without having parking spots that are surfaced with lines on it, everybody parks haphazardly, and they'll park this way and that way, and you get about half the parking you can in the park as a result of that. So when you have car shows and other events, you don't get as much parking down there because everybody just parks any way they want to park.
Right.
And if you
Well,
got organized, you
Can
get
we
more parking.
address the rest of this and not include a splash?
Well, one thing we could do is if the only issue is the splash pad and its location next to the pond, is we could explore the opportunity to look at another site within the park for the splash pad. And work
Like on the
with,
north end of it or something?
we could
Okay.
explore our options as far as where we might place it to be more accommodating. Be glad to have input from Councilman Woods or others. Our thoughts are we're going to try to make this blend in with the historic uniqueness of the park, but even though it's a historic park, it's just like, if you look at our swimming pool, when those swimming pools were built in the 1930s, that was the trend, that was the thing. Everybody wanted that big cement pond. People don't use those anymore. Very few kids swim in a big pond like that anymore. Most of the recreation is done in splash pads and shallow water instead of the deep ponds. So you have to make some changes if you're going to do things to serve your current population, and that's what we're trying to do, is do things to attract young professionals, young entrepreneurs with young families in our community. We've got to have amenities that are appeasing to them, not what appeased to people back in 1910.
Well, one thing I've got to
But we
admit.
do it, though, we want to do it where it's complementary of the past.
Councilman Case.
I've got to admit that though Mineral Wells is not presently a neighborhood park, a child-friendly park, really. I mean, there's kids play there, but it's not like
Banner?
no.
Highland?
It's not like Highland Park. There's not kids just everywhere when you go to Mineral Wells. And maybe we can turn that into that. And maybe there's a possibility to do that. But as far as historically at least historically from my knowledge, how it's always been kind of an adult park. It's where people went to eat lunch and get under the shade trees and relax. It's not really been a child's park before because it's not in a neighborhood. It's not like they can get up, leave the house and walk a block and be at the park like they can at some of the others. So maybe this is a good idea.
Well, it had a wading pool.
It used to be.
Yeah, it had a wading pool initially.
Historically, it was different
Yeah.
from what I knew.
Yeah, they had a wading pool
There
initially.
were some differences.
And historically, there were smaller shelters there, in addition to.
There
the-
were homes
back
closer,
in the day.
all that area just to the north, I'm sure had homes at one time.
So what happens with the basketball court and the tennis courts and everything we redid? How does that all come into play in the new plan?
It won't change those. I mean, they'll continue to be used just like they are now.
And if we looked at, just speaking of Highland, because you bring up Highland, we've been out there quite a few times as well. We looked at that as an opportunity for this? Or is that?
We looked at it, but we felt that this was the better location for this particular project. It addressed several things. At some point, we're going to have to make a decision on the big swimming pool in Highland and make decisions there. When we make that decision, then I think we would be in a position to do some new things in Highland, but we really need to make a decision on what we're going to do with that aging swimming pool before we do something in Highland.
Well, I agree, because that swimming pool is definitely outdated, and it has its issues, and we just barely keep it running year by year, and both by people, with the Y
Well, it's like
looking
you
after
said,
it.
maybe we fill that swimming pool in and build a monster splash pad park out there.
What I would like to see, and this is just my dream, not the community's dream or anybody's at this point, but when we redo Highland, I would like to do it in a way where we do a splash pad, but we put in some water slides with it, make it a bigger thing, and put some water slides in where you have, instead of going into a pool, you go into a trough.
Right.
And you slow down, and then maybe provide a small, more shallow swimming lanes for aerobic exercise, for swimming lessons, rather than put a gigantic pond in.
Right.
Do some unique features like that. I don't know that we're ready to move to that project yet.
And I would just like to add from the citizen survey from 2016, that this project checks for the boxes of the top 9 things that people asked for. Number 3 was youth activities, 7 senior activities, 8 sidewalk improvements, and 9 park improvements. So I feel like we're really giving the community what they've asked for with this project. And then just to parlay what Leroy said, Mineral Wells is the more centralized location, and so we felt if we were going to do this first project and make improvements, that Mineral Wells would be kind of like the central location to highlight that, hey, we're doing things in Guthrie, and we're providing amenities or updating amenities that the community has asked for.
Well, and no question, it has a high visibility area with the proximity to Division. And I think there is a visibility, there is an appearance issue there. I think it's is a very positive one, that, hey, we are moving ahead.
It is in plain sight.
It is. And, and I know the basketball court gets used significant. I know the lights are on an awful lot when I drive by. So I think that's a positive thing from a standpoint of use of the park area that I never saw before. Before the
You think maybe they go there because nobody's there?
No, before the resurfacing of the basketball courts and the tennis courts. So I think that's a positive. And as we all know, the gazebo gets used quite a bit.
Yeah, my only concern is it's $500,000 basically out of pocket. The sports complex can be a revenue generator, period, and it can be big time. That can bring in tremendous revenue to Guthrie. The splash pad is going to be something, I can vision what you're talking about because I've seen the whole thing. And like I say, when we have our granddaughter, we go park hopping, so I know all the different parks around. In Guthrie, Edmond, Oklahoma City, and it'd be awesome. But we're limited on the money that we have, guys and gals. I mean, that's just the fact.
One thing I might add that's under consideration by the task force for the sports complex is a proposal to take our motel tax from 4% to 8%. And the additional 4% would be locked in for sports facilities. And that would generate over 15 years at our current amount of taxes we get from the motels, about $3.5 million. So with that, and if you get $3.5 million from a land water conservation fund, that would fund the first phase or half of the project. So we're not trying to limit ourselves on the sports facility to just the CIP tax, because you're not going to get there on a $14 million project,
Not a
just taking it out.
No, it's not going to happen.
No.
It's just concerning because we've got a $10-12 million wastewater treatment plant that's just sitting out there. We're doing nothing. That we paid $1 million basically for engineering. And it's just more money that should and could be going towards infrastructure, so to speak, whether it be a sports complex infrastructure that's going to generate revenue or a new wastewater treatment plant that's going to take waste.
Sewage
It's
lines and
eventually
water
going to
lines.
close up, supposedly on us.
I mean, I like this idea. I think it's a great thing that we could do this park. I just don't like the money, just like Mr. Bothroyd's saying. I think it's a lot of money that we could put somewhere else at the moment.
And I don't know if it makes a difference, but not all of our contribution is cash. A lot of it is in-kind labor.
Well, let's
that-
talk about that.
That Public Works can do. I can pull out the budget for that.
That's a potential game changer if that's the case.
Yeah.
Leroy?
For me,
We're
anyway.
talking about just hard dollars of
Because I thought this was a
$437, half a million.
dollar match, but if
Yeah.
there's an in-kind,
Yeah, we did have in-kind labor
That
contributions
does
as a
change the-
portion of that.
At Banner, how much, Tenny, what was our estimate on how much we contributed in kind?
We did about 250,000 in kind.
So
Yeah, that makes a big
approximately
difference.
50%?
Yes.
So there you go, folks.
well, but let's see what, if she's got some
Yeah,
hard
let's see
numbers
what-
on it, I would like to see them, especially if we're going to vote on this.
Yeah.
I don't have a breakdown, but I can tell you what we do on all these projects is we explore what our opportunities is to use in-kind labor to save money. But then we weigh that against the other project load that we have too.
When does this particular grant need to be accepted? I mean, would it
I
make
want-
sense,
I
would it
want
make
an
sense,
answer to.
would it make sense to push this one council till we could have those type numbers and make a reasonable decision?
Are you under a timeline? I mean, obviously there is, but I mean, how tight are you?
I'm not sure how tight that is.
I don't think we have a deadline that we have to accept it tonight. We can push it to the next meeting if you all chose to do so.
I think that would get you, because that is a big game changer with in-kind.
I think that, and possibly moving the splash pad to a different location or seeing more what the splash pad would look like. Again, with the pavilions, the playground equipment, the parking, the hard surfaces, I think that's a great idea. And
And I don't know
And
that it's
this
going to
is-
be so much of a neighborhood thing like Banner, where the kids are moving, their kids are coming from the neighborhood houses there. I think this is going to be more something that you're going to actually bring your kid or your grandchildren to, and you're probably going to stay there with them. At least we would.
Well,
Not
I
just gonna
would.
drop
And
off.
as I drive through the park, it is a destination park because there's a lot of people that go and park during the day. I see a lot of children out with mothers and,
There
you
is
know,
a concern
fathers.
about the car shows, big-time car shows
Yeah.
and stuff that we have there to make sure that they can all park and
Can I ask a
still get all
question?
that in.
And still get,
We
yeah. 'cause they-
closed the park for those.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Leroy, if we were to replace the splash pad with a wading pool, of course, if the wading pool, parents are going to be there. Children aren't going to go there by themselves to get in a wading pool. Parents are going to be with them if they're in a wading pool. So the guidance that you'd need there for the water, if the pond is an issue, then you're going to have guidance if it's a wading pool. And it brings us back to where we historically were.
You could
Is
put up
is there any chance of doing something like that and replacing the water?
There
So
is.
that you still get the grant?
There is, but if you look at the trends of use of parks,
They use
the
splash
most
pads.
popular thing now is splash pad.
And that's what they,
And the splash pad probably has less liability than a wading pool. I mean, you could drown in 6 inches of water.
Yeah, you
You
got
know?
a point there. You got a point there. I was just trying to think.
No,
of an
I hear
option
what you're saying, Jim.
That kept the parents right
I
there.
think there's a good-
if we just
yeah.
fence that one area right there, it covers it, I believe, just right there.
But it also destroys the park.
Not necessarily up, we fence it up at the water edge. Anyway, I would like personally, my whole issue's always been about the money.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see the in-kind so that I personally can,
And mine is money,
Well,
mine is
it-
money and liability on splash
The
pad next to
liability's
the
a big
pond.
issue.
I see that, and I hate to see the pond being fenced off, because people go up and feed the ducks, they fish, they do a lot of things around there. So there's, I mean, that's part of the draw is to go up and get on water's edge, but
maybe it
most-
fences up on the edge of the,
higher up where people can still get down.
along the splash pad
That's
area.
what we
Yeah, around
had
the
was
splash
the
pad.
perimeter around the splash pad. That's what was quoted from the fence. So not the pond, but the splash pad
Yeah,
perimeter
it's a
would be
great-
an ornamental fence.
Because you can
Yeah.
have a road there too.
Right,
And you don't want the kids running out into the middle of the road,
well.
the
they will.
driveway going.
They will.
I mean,
They will.
we can look at that. We've got, I mean, we do have playground areas in a lot of parks that are close to water in a lot of our parks in our community.
Oh, yeah, it's true.
Highland.
They are fenced.
Lake Guthrie.
And it's- yeah.
No, they're not fenced,
Well, Lake Guthrie's different.
and nor is Highland. And
No, it's not.
That's quite a
And it's
ways.
right next to
That
a
it's
pool.
right there. It's right there.
Swimming pool.
So I don't think we should get too, I think it's something that we shouldn't ignore,
Right.
but I don't think we should get
But the
Too
pool's
worked up
fenced.
too
The
worked
pool
up.
is fenced.
Yeah.
No, the pool is, but
Next
not a fence around the water.
No,
Right, no.
And there's
it's
playground.
Quite a ways, there's quite a bit of distance between the two. too.
So, I think when we're talking about doubling our money, being able to put down, get half, put down 50%, I think there's a lot to say about that. Yes, it is a lot. I'm not minimizing that it's a lot of money.
But it
we're
depends.
always-
If your roof is falling off your house, you're not going to build a swimming pool. You're going to fix your roof. Okay, that's how that works, 100% of the time, for a fact. Okay, in life, in real life.
Yeah.
Got a hole in your roof, that's getting fixed before anything. Okay, we got holes everywhere, okay, that need to be fixed. So the in-kind is huge.
Yes.
If we can take that in kind and shrink that cash outlay down 250, 300 grand,
To where we can put a roof
then
on
now
our
it's a
house.
reason, yeah, exactly, now we're at a reasonable, livable scenario.
One other
Across the
thing
board.
I would point out, this agency, OTRD,
that this comes from, of course, if we apply for other land and water conservation grants, we apply to other trails. If we do not move forward this grant, there is some element of, are we
Serious.
creating a relationship that would jeopardize funding in the future?
Well, that was another question. If we
And-
turn this down, will this a black mark against us on other
well,
grants?
they're not going to tell you that.
But, yeah,
yes.
you don't use this.
Actually, I think they will tell you that, won't they?
The agencies normally aren't that blunt, but I mean, the
Or when they turn you down.
developing relationships with this agency is part of the process where they will communicate with you and help guide you through the application process. And Rebecca's done a great job of developing a relationship with the representatives from that entity to get them to share information on not only this grant, but future grants to make them more competitive. And we don't want that relationship to go away because we want to be in a position to pursue other grants. I think we're willing to take guidance from the city council and to the degree possible use InKind Labor. I think that if we need to do a fence or look at repositioning the aquatic center, I think staff's receptive to all that's guidance. But I think when you look at all in all, keep moving our community forward, keep looking at things that are the type of amenities that are going to attract young professionals, young entrepreneurs to our community. I know it's not a direct revenue generator, but that's what's going to make our community grow. And that's the type of employees and where business and industry want to be, is where those young professionals and young entrepreneurs and young families are.
Well, one, I'd like to commend you on all the efforts that you and the city staff go through to try to find additional funding outside of our own.
Yes,
And
to you
trying to make
for doing
it, so
it.
number
Thank you.
one, I
I know that's
want
a
to
tough
say
job.
thank you for the hard work you guys have all done in trying to put this together. This may not be the perfect project for what we're wanting to do, but if you look at even like today, the bridge ceremony, everything that's been happening in Guthrie in the last couple of years has been very, very productive, it moves Guthrie forward. We've done a lot. We've done a lot since I've been on council to really move Guthrie, advance Guthrie, and you've been the forefront of all of that. So I really want to say, all of the staff, actually, Kim, all of y'all, I want to say thank you for the work you've done in trying to do that. This may not be the project for us, but at the same time, I think the public needs to know the hard work that you guys go through to get us where we're at right now, having this discussion about something that may or may not happen, but at least we've got our ducks in a row, and you guys have already gone forward and found additional funding to make this possible without it all coming from our CIP. So number one, I want to say thank you. Number two, I don't really, the neighborhood park thing of this is my issue with it. It's not so much the pond, it's not so much any of the rest of that. It's just that this really isn't, and never, to my knowledge, now maybe it was at one time, but it's not really a neighborhood park. There's not a neighborhood around it. There's not a lot of kids there. I'm thinking that that's not a good spend of our money. I think if like Brian was talking about, I don't want to really necessarily go out and buy someplace, but if we've got an area in a neighborhood that has no park, that the kids don't have anything to do in that neighborhood, such as what he was talking about over behind Ace on the east side of, on the south side of Guthrie east side, southeast side, that there's nothing in there. And to give those kids something would really be, I think, a better spend of the money. And that's where I'm at. I really
And
think you've come up with a great plan. I
And I'm
just
not
don't know if that's the plan.
disagreeing with you, but land and water conservation funds are looking at more of a regional thing that serves a larger population than just one neighborhood.
Right.
And by doing it this way, you're putting a second splash pad in our neighborhood. I think we'll see the first one we have in Banner Park is going to be overloaded if that's the only splash pad we have in the
It's going to
community.
explode, yeah.
And by having a second one, it gives relief. We have a lot of family reunions in the park, Mineral Wells Park. This will be another amenity for those family reunions. More and more families are going, is one or two families might go together. So these small pavilions that we're putting in there will accommodate a number of small family groups going to the park and having outings, and part of that communication with each other and being able to have relationships and bonding with other people in the community would be something that would be fostered in this type setting.
So do we take the big pavilion out?
No,
No,
that's
absolutely not. We would add 5 small pavilions.
Around, just around the grounds? some-
3 around the playground area and 2 by the splash pad.
Same style?
Same
Yeah.
style.
Keeping
we're-
with the historic style.
And the water's right there for the splash pad. I think the in-kind goes a long way.
I
That
was
really
going to
cha-
say,
that is a game changer, and that does change my mind in a lot of ways, as long as we can do in kind, because
Does mine too.
437 right out of pocket, hard dollars is
If-
like,
I would like to say something about the neighborhood parks, though. When I was growing up 100 years ago, we didn't have neighborhood parks because neighborhood parks serve only
The
the
neighborhood.
small, tiny neighborhood. We cannot put splash pads and all those things in little neighborhood
Right.
parks, but we can serve a lot of people in the footprint of the park we have now. And I agree with the earlier statement that if we want to build some industry in the future here in Guthrie, we're going to have to appeal to the people that like to take their children to a park, sit in a pavilion, talk and chat, let the children play, and then go home. And we can't do that if we don't accept this and apply the in-kind and move on.
And again, I don't think it's going to be a park that kids come to and get dropped off at.
I don't think so either.
I
The-
hope-
The new mothers aren't doing that as much.
And the grandparents aren't either.
No.
They're not going to just toss the kids and go.
And
Banner's a
again-
different deal. That's a neighborhood park.
And again, we will explore all opportunities to use in-kind labor where we can as part of our match.
my only concern with the idea of relocating the splash pad was we were utilizing the existing water line from the old wading pool to save money on cost on having to extend that line. So that would be my only concern there, is maybe that would increase our cost.
But the fence might
I don't think
be
you
a
have to move it.
solution.
Yeah, I'm not sure that you have to move that. Yeah,
Mr. Mayor,
yeah.
I came in here not wanting to do this, but I'd like to make a motion that we proceed with this.
Well, aren't we going to look at the in-kind numbers?
yeah, we're going to.
Did you say you had in kind or not?
We could hold it off.
Rebecca?
or see
I
the
thought I
in-kind
had
numbers.
them, but I don't have them on me. My best would be an estimate from
Okay,
what Tinny
all right,
could
just a
do on the
minute, just a minute.
project.
You don't have
I don't
it?
have them on me.
And even if we were to give you in-kind numbers, the abilities of our public works crews continue to grow. And we learned things from Banner Park by watching the contractors, and Tinny and his crews did that specifically so they could do things next time that they couldn't do this time. So it may be hard to give you a number until we get into the project, because we're constantly learning. We've got a good crew, and they're constantly trying to learn new things and watch contractors and how things
Yeah,
are
because we're
done.
not necessarily concrete people, but we're
Correct.
turning into that.
Correct.
I get that.
So you know, even if we give you a number, that may fluctuate some. But I can tell you with Tenny's crews, we will use as much in-kind labor as we can, given the other projects we have going, to keep the match down to the degree that we can.
Then I think
Bottom
we
line-
should vote on it, and I would second his.
Well, bottom line, I think the in-kind changes my mind on what
Well,
it
it does
was.
me.
I mean, because it was just too much money, but.
If it was dollar for dollar, that's just.
Were you making a motion?
Yes, sir, I was.
Okay, we have a motion, and Cheryl, you had a second.
Yes.
I have a motion and a second to approve. Is there any further discussion?
No.
Submit your votes. Let's see the votes. Unanimous approval to move forward with the acceptance of the grant funds for the splash pad playground improvements at Mineral Wells Park.